Welcome to the Whurthy Services training video series. This is Module 6, Whurthy Automation. In this second video, we're going to walk through Cancel for Location. We're going to start with an overview of what Cancel for Location is and how it can simplify the process of shutting down a location should there be a need to do so. We'll then look at how to initiate the cancel location shutdown workflow, and then we'll review the automated notify and cancellation functionality within Whurthy Services. When initiating cancel for location, Whurthy will check all the public holidays, opening hours, and service provider vacations. That will mean that if you select a date where it's a public holiday, the Whurthy won't even initiate anything because, for example, with a public holiday, the location would be closed anyway. And it's the same thing with opening hours and service provider vacations. However, with cancel for location, it's a little bit different than canceling bookings, where we looked at the previous workflow when we're canceling bookings for a service provider. When we're canceling for a location, if there are any days on which the location is open, then it will block those off. It would, in effect, make those days unavailable to be booked. What will also happen is that if the workflow approval active is yes, then there will be a task assigned to the cancellation approver. This is a very similar step as in the workflow when we cancel for a service provider. Then once the approval has been activated, or if we don't have workflow approval active, then a task is assigned to the cancellation coordinator to select how those cancellations will be processed. As is the case with the cancel for the service provider, there will be an opportunity to automate the notifications and to automate the cancellations. And in both those instances, you can select to manually do this. And our expectation is that 99% of the time, you would be advised to automate the booking cancellation, because what that will do is that will take care of making sure it's done correctly. And it will remove or eliminate any potential of errors being made done with that. As for notification, that on a case-by-case basis may be something that you opt to do manually based on the rapport that you have or the number of customers that are influenced by this particular decision. Obviously, if there is a cancel for location because of some regulatory shutdown, then there may be, particularly for those organizations that have many customers, there may be a lot of legwork to do if you were to manually notify everybody. And so the design intention behind the cancel for location workflow is really about bringing a great deal of value, efficiency, and effectiveness in simplifying such moments for you by having a lot of the legwork taken care of. Okay, with that reviewed, let's dive in and take a look at the staff experience. So now that I'm in the staff experience here, I'm going to look over to the right-hand sidebar, Whurthy links. I'm going to scroll down. And as is often the case, we're going to look at administration. Now, in this case, remembering that your particular installation with Whurthy, you have the option to use different labels. When it comes to the service providers, in this installation, they're called therapists. And also you have the opportunity to label locations however you want. So you may call them locations, you may call them rooms, you may call them offices. So if you're following along and you've got a different term or a different word there, what you'll find is beneath the service providers or therapists, you will then see the location setting. So to be able to access the cancel for location, we're going to need to go to cancel for. We're going to click on the locations link here. Well, that's going to take us into the list of the different locations. So in this particular installation of Whurthy, we've got 2 different locations and we've got 1 service provider working at each one. So we actually have 2 service providers, 2 locations. 1 service provider is working at 1 location and another service provider is working at another location. And so when it comes to service providers, when they're set up, or in this case, therapists, they are assigned to a location. So that is one of the constraints within the system. So when I come, what I'm going to do now is I'm going to walk through a test. And because we have one service provider for one location, when we trigger the cancel for location in this particular test and demonstration, you're only going to see it impact one service provider. However, if there were multiple service providers against a location, all of the service providers are going to, in effect, be made unavailable for any bookings between the approved time period or date period that's selected. And that's going to make more sense as we walk through. And the main thing to remember here, that is the important distinction. Cancel for location is definitely a workflow that should be used with caution. It should be used sparingly, because you are in effect shutting down that location from the Whurthy Services perspective. In that date period that is selected, no customers will be able to make any bookings during this time period. So because all of the service providers in effect will be put on vacation. So let's take a look. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to select on Downtown Sunrise, the location. And the moment we go in there, now we get to see, not only do we have the back to locations, the edit location, there's also the cancel for location. This is a business administrator or super user feature. So regular staff shouldn't be able to do this. This will take a business admin being able to initiate this. And so I'm going to go ahead and click on cancel for location. Now, this part of the process is very, very similar to when we are canceling for a service provider. So I'm going to assume you've already watched that video. It really isn't complicated. We've got here some instructions. Again, assuming that you've already watched the Whurthy checklist, the previous video, you will be aware of the process expertise profile, and you'll be aware of the learned experience engine. So these instructions came from the learned experience engine. So you'll be able to make adjustments to what appears in the instructions here. In the next card, we then get to see the cancel services from field, the cancel services to, and a cancellation reason. These three fields are identical to the setup for the cancel for service provider. So there shouldn't be anything new here. So I'm going to go ahead. I've already put in, for the purposes of this demonstration, I've already created some appointments that are going to result in some cancellations actually happening. I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to click from December the 21st to December the 22nd. And I'm going to mark in here that I'm testing December 21st to 22nd. And this is in the Downtown Sunrise location. Okay. Now, obviously, this cancellation reason, you're going to want to put something in that is going to make sense to your customers, because when it works through the workflow, ultimately this cancellation reason, whatever's entered in here, will actually be used as the message filler for the email. In other words, that reason will be listed right inside the email that's sent out. So we do encourage you to put in a readable and intelligible reason, because ultimately that's what will appear in the email. In this particular instance, this particular setup, we've got the workflow approval is set to yes, it is active. So we are going to see the approval task as the next step. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to click here on submit cancellation requests. Okay, and so then what we end up with is the success flash message at the top. And we can see now that the cancellation request for the location Downtown Sunrise has been submitted for approval. But again, if the approval workflow is inactive, it will actually tell you that it's been submitted for action. So what I can do is I can click over here in my email client. I can see an email has arrived. And so this is a pretty simple notification. Both the approval task and the follow-up task will show a very similar message. It's letting you know that approval task has been sent, and it's giving you a link right to the task. I could obviously access this by clicking on my tasks, assuming that I am the cancellation approver in this case. And so what I can do here is I can click on this link, and that's going to take me right into the task. And so what I can see here, obviously, first of all, I can see the instructions. And now I can scroll down. It's really letting me know in this case that if I'm putting in a decline decision as the approver, it does want me to enter some decision comments. And then it's letting me know that if I approve it, that the cancellation coordinator will be in effect assigned a task to process the refunds and in effect the cancellations. And so I'm going to scroll down under this task description. This looks very, very similar again. In fact, this is almost identical to the cancel for service provider workflow from the perspective that when it comes to canceling for a location, at this stage, really the focus is not only letting you know the location that is actually being influenced. And so the key difference on this between the two workflows is on the cancel for service provider, you'd actually see the service provider. In this case, they're called therapists here. But because this is cancel for location, this is letting you know the location. And we can also see in the request reference, we've got the word location at the beginning of that request reference as well. It then shows us the actual location and then the date range. So I've selected from December 21st to December the 22nd. We can see who requested it, and we can see then the date and time that it was requested. It then brings in the cancellation reason. And then what it's going to do is it's going to list all of the bookings. So as we look here, there's a couple of things to pay attention to. Of the first note here is the customer loyalty will show. So if they're a guest, it would just be regular plain text. In this second entry, we can see here that this customer is actually a VIP. So it's bolded and colored green. We can see that the email is cut, that line that talks about the customer notification preference. It's blue. That's designed to pop out just to let you know, yeah, this customer has the notification preference of email. And so in that case, if you automate the notifications, Whurthy Services will email this person. If you were reviewing through this and you, for example, had customer notification preference set to none, that would be kind of rare because in effect, what a customer would have done in an installation where you've got text messaging set up, customers can select none, text or email. So it's very rare that it should be very rare that you should have none select for customer notification preference. And if I recall correctly, if actually it is none here, this line will be in red text. So the idea of that is that will just pop out, because what that's telling you now is if you go ahead and automate notification, because there is no notification preference for a customer with the preference set as none, Whurthy Services isn't going to automatically notify them. So in that case, that's where if you've got a number of customers that have none for notification preference, then you might select manual notifications and take care of notifying them or manually reaching out to each person. It's also giving you their phone number and their email, whatever they've got on file. So if they don't have a phone number, it won't show it. So as we scroll down here, we can see here towards the bottom, it's now actually telling us that there's actually $525 worth of refunds because we've actually had all of these are all paid. So we can see that there's the regular cost. So that's actually what the customer is paid. We know that because the booking status is marked as paid here as well. But it's totaling this all up. It's actually totaling the tax. It's totaling the total refunds. And it's also if there happen to have been any deposits paid or any amounts due, that would also show. In this case, all these bookings were all prepaid, as it were. And so this gives us a total for that. And then in the final card, we get to see what the task action is. So the first step is we get to make the decision of approved or declined. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and just enter in some comments. Approved December 21st to 22nd shutdown. So if you have a situation where all locations need to be shut down, multiple locations, you would need to go through and initiate the cancel for location workflow for all of the locations for each one. So I'm going to go ahead and complete the approval task. And so now it's giving me at the top of the page, the cancellation request has been marked as approved and will now be assigned to be completed by the cancellation coordinator. So that's a success flash message. I can also see here now that I've got a new task. Now, in this instance, I am both the cancellation approver and the cancellation coordinator. That may be different in your example. So just remembering if you have the workflow approval is inactive, it would go straight to this task of basically following up on that request because in effect you turned off the approval. But what I can see in the bottom right hand corner here, I can see that I've received an email. Just to show you this, it's exactly the same thing. I can click on the link this way, or I can access through my tasks, and then I can access the task that way. So this task is going to look a little different. First of all, we can notice that the instructions are quite different. So we review the bookings below and determine how you'd like to proceed. Please note that following important information regarding completing this task, because remember, this is actually about, now that the approval is in play, this is now about deciding what you want to do, whether you want to automate notification or cancellation or both. And so here, cancel request actions taken. So use this field to write up all the actions you have and or will be taken. The more detailed you are, the more helpful it is. For example, you may use this field to track those customers you have contacted manually, which segues into the next field, which is cancel request notification. So select automated notification to have Whurthy automatically notify all customers that opted in. Review all the records below to identify those customers you need to contact manually. So I touched on that previously. If they had the notification preference set to none, that's going to tell you that you're going to need to contact them manually. Please note, once you have selected automated notification and saved, the field will disappear to prevent more than one send. You obviously wouldn't want to send multiple emails to your customers, for example. And then in the third field here, cancel request cancellation. So select automated booking cancellation to have Whurthy block all bookings for the time period and to cancel all existing bookings. And then finally, task status. When you've completed this task, select the status complete. So that's going to make more sense in a minute, particularly for those more complicated situations where you've got some customers that say have the notification preference of email and others that have none. You may opt to trigger automated notification, and we'll get to see how that looks because you'll actually then get to see all the emails that were sent in the history log. But you then may also have to manually reach out. So you wouldn't want to mark the task status as complete until you had manually reached out to all of those customers that had the notification preference set to none. So we're going to scroll down. Now this is almost identical. We get to see the request information, the cancellation reason, and then I get to see all of the bookings that they influence. This is identical at this point. And then we get to see again, these are the total refunds. And now we get to see the request decision. So it's showing us, these were the comments that were put in, letting us know whatever the cancellation reason that I entered in there. And so remembering, this is what gets sent out to customers. And then we get to see the task activity. So this is now about the follow-up. So I can put in here, if I were managing the scenario where we had some customers with the notification preference set to none, now I might even maintain a bit of a bullet list. I might list, customers to manually follow up with, and then I can start listing, whatever their email, email 1, email 2, whatever it might be. And so now I'm just using this field as a note-taking field, in effect. It just allows me to track. And of course, any other team member that comes in and have, sort of reviews what's happened, they're going to be able to see this as well. We've got the task status here. I'm going to mark this is in progress. Now, in this case, what I'm going to go ahead and do, I'm not going to mark it as complete for now. I'm going to just take a look at this. We've already reviewed what the instructions are. Automated booking cancellation or manual. I'm going to go ahead and trigger the automated booking cancellation. And before you even approve the cancel for location, you might go ahead and make the changes to the service provider records first. In other words, before you approve the shutdown of location A, you may go, okay, let's move all these service providers to a different location, do that logistical work, get that all taken care of. And then when you trigger cancel for workflow, it's not going to create those, in effect, those cancellation records in the holiday list. So that's one little tip if you are dealing with a more complex situation. For the purpose of this demo, though, we're not really going to that level of detail and complexity, but, again, hopefully just relaying that here for you just offers you that awareness of, even the more complicated type scenarios are possible. And so finally, I've got this cancel request notification. I'm going to go ahead and select automated for both. I'm going to click on update follow-up task here. And so that took a little while, but not surprising, because when we look at the success flash message, we get to see that it did quite a bit of work. Now, that probably took, what, 5 seconds? I'm fairly confident in guaranteeing that it would take you longer, more than 5 seconds, to cancel 5 bookings and send out 5 emails. So that really, just in this simple example, now imagine if you had, you know, like 4 or 5 service providers at a location and they were fully booked for those days. You might have hundreds of bookings that you need to cancel, and you might have hundreds of customers that you need to notify. So when you start to consider this very simplified demonstration example, but you consider what would actually happen in the real world when you're shutting down, it's our sense that this particular feature of Whurthy, particularly given what's happened, you know, in the year 2020 and moving on, you know, the impact, particularly to retail or public facing organizations, and the potential for regulatory shutdowns, it's ever more likely, and it certainly has been a challenge in the past, I'm sure, for many organizations. Maybe, you know, you're watching this video and you're thinking back to 2020 and 2021, and you're remembering, you know, the legwork that you had to do. So we're really hoping that that sort of provides that, you know, clarity. But I'm going to show you the final thing for the purposes of this video. I'm going to go ahead and click on this task. And the reason why is I'm going to scroll down to the bottom and I'm going to take a look at the task history log, because this is the important part. What's going to happen now is, before there wasn't a task history log because there really wasn't anything to note. This task history, though, is obviously centered around the activity of notifications and cancellations. And because we select automated, we actually happen to have these 5 clients here. So it's letting us know I've sent an email to this client. So this is their first and their last name, the email address that it's sent to. So in this case, and then also the date and the time that it was sent. And then it will then list all of the bookings that were canceled. And obviously that's going to line up. And again, if you had hundreds of bookings, obviously that list could get very long. But the intention of exposing this task history log to you is to give you a bit of peace of mind. And that could be particularly helpful if I'm editing the task here and I scroll down and I've had some customers where they had notification preference set to none. I still get to see in the task here, oh, here are all of the customers that were notified. And so now I can sort of, as I'm tracking that information, who do I need to manually follow up? We've got that task history log showing us who was automatically notified. And for that matter, you may want to do a phone call or some additional follow-up just to just to double check and say, yep, our system, it should have sent you an email, wanted to make sure you got that email because wouldn't want you to show up and we're closed. And, and that may be the opportunity really where you say, hey, but we are expecting to be open on this date. Could I make a booking for you? And so that really is that great opportunity to reach out and just make a bit of a connection with them and invite them to book again. And from the perspective of convenience, you could go ahead and book again right on the phone. Just as we go up here, we could just literally click on the customer profile, go and book an appointment for them right within Whurthy Services. Okay, so that concludes the review of Cancel for Location. And we're hopeful that in having reviewed all these videos that you've really been impressed with a sense of the design intention and our focus on truly value made easy.